And greetings, everybody, especially to the few of you that are joining me live at this late hour. It's been a busy day. Welcome to the Evidence and Reasons for the Christian Faith video channel. I'm Salvador Cordova. This channel is dedicated to exploring evidences of the Christian faith, particularly in God's creation through the study of creation science, creationism, intelligent design. That's about 65% of the channel, and the remainder is about 10-15% archaeology and maybe 15 to 10% personal testimonies, and then anything else that may come to mind. Those proportions may change over time. This week, though, we're having special reports related to a big megachurch that I am a part of, McLean Bible Church. In Christendom right now, there is a lot of attention. This is kind of a hot spot. A lot is at stake. The megachurch has peaked last year, attendance almost 20,000, and its tangible assets are probably in the range from $100 to $200 million, so call it about $150 million. The title of this talk is that when each vote was worth $1 million, literally. It's very interesting I don't think sometimes church members realize that when a congregation has inherited through the work of others and donations of others over 50 years, they are stewards and beneficiaries of hard work and labors and volunteers and donations of generations or decades before them. This past June 30th, there was a vote. About 150 people voted. There was the critical vote. The 150 people, a block of about 150. We don't know the exact numbers. It's not been published, which is somewhat disconcerting that a church won't report the number of votes actually, exact number of votes cast. But in any case, if the number's between 150, 250, whatever, let's just say the number of votes, the no votes for the present leadership was 150. The no votes for the present leadership was 150. What hangs in the balance is roughly $150 million of tangible assets. Literally, every person that just decided to become a member of the church, and you just say you're a believer in Jesus Christ, you go through an examination of what your beliefs are and your church history, some things about your family, just kind of a standard questionnaire. And then you are given voting rights, and there's certain expectations of how you conduct yourself. 150 people showed up. I don't think they realized, most of them, I think a lot of them realized it, but if you think about it, each vote they cast counted for about $1 million. That's a huge responsibility because you don't know who's coming through the doors of the church, and when they sign up to become members, it could boil down to just a few individuals that will decide the outcome of, just in terms of business, tangible assets of that magnitude. This is why this fight is surprisingly becoming a big deal, because those votes determine who's the leadership and how this property will be managed. Just the legacy of the congregation. The church is more than property. It really is the people, the body of Christ. It's not the property. But whenever money of that magnitude starts to get involved, and just few numbers of people can actually determine how that property is used, there can be some pretty interesting fights. You would not expect that church security plus county security, armed police officers that are normally used for the protection of the congregation, because there's a lot of nut jobs out there, including domestic violence issues where some disgruntled husband might come in there and try to kill his wife right there in the church. It happened not too long ago at another church somewhere else. That's very disturbing. But so there's protections in place for the congregation. I feel that security force was misused by the leadership to prevent airing of dissent and concerns about the conduct of the church. Therefore, many of us, in light of such behavior and many other behaviors of the leadership, were casting no votes. I cast a no vote. Another big vote is coming up July 18th. And it's part of a series of votes that could determine the leadership of McLean Bible. I don't get paid to deal with these headaches. It's just part of my responsibility since I'm a member. Now, as I said before, there's a part of me that likes the grocery store model of attending church. You can either be a customer or a part of management. If you're a member, you're a part of management. You're not just a customer that can walk out. I could submit my resignation and say, well, I don't get paid for these headaches and no longer have voting privileges. But I'm very, very concerned that there has been a violation of trust for what we have inherited to the founding families of the church. It's not exactly analogous to the idea that if a will is signed and describes what is supposed to go to the heirs, the person in charge of executing that will and making sure that it's carried out is called the executor. He's expected to take care of the last will and testament of the deceased. I'm having to face that myself since my mother passed away recently, and I just got a call from the probate court because I've been named as the executor in my mother's estate. And so a similar situation applies to the church. There are founding documents for the church. When people become a part of the church, there's the expectation that what they're signing up for is to maintain the intentions outlined in that founding document, and that will govern how the money is spent, etc., and a lot of the activities. What has happened is this sacred trust, much like the last will and testament of a deceased individual, we feel is being violated. Christian churches consider that in the early church, in the Old Testament and the New Testament, a Christian's word is considered sacred. If you sign up to uphold and execute a document that says these are your responsibilities to carry this out, you're expected to do that. So if you become part of the leadership, that means you're going to try to uphold what we call the Constitution, which is like not quite like a last will and testament, but hopefully you get the idea of the gravity of this. And when that's not being done, that's not right. It dishonors the people that had founded the church and their work. Some of them are still alive and part of the church. They have been marginalized by the incoming pastor. So one of these members that has been a part of the church since its founding 50 years ago is now being called from the pulpit as a part of a divisive group that is spreading disinformation. And I take exception to seeing people kind of mislabeled that way. There are probably stronger words I could use. I'm not going to use that. But these statements are untrue. Leadership that conducts itself in this way needs to be removed. If I can help correct a wrong, I will, to whatever extent. And also, the body of Christ, as I said, is more than the tangible assets. It really is fundamentally the people and who the leadership governs. And if they're not being taught well and governed well, if there's a chance to change the leadership, that would be good. Now, some people have indeed left. I have here, since I was at the congregational meeting on June 30th, this document was sent out, and it's kind of problematic because it's kind of the financials of the church. And I have to tell you, this document is kind of scary in terms of how sketchy it is and the lack of transparency in this document. There's several people that are financially savvy at McLean Bible Church, and the reporting and transparency. Look how thin this is. If you're managing assets of that magnitude, and also revenues maybe approaching $10 million, but I have heard figures of $20 million a year, you're just going to have a little document like this when you're accountable and there have been concerns raised where the money's going. If the leadership is being negligent, and I hope it's just being negligent, at worst there could be some disconcerting dealings of what's going on. That stuff is being hidden or covered up. That non-disclosure agreements, which are normally meant to protect sensitive information, is being used as a mechanism to cover up embarrassing details or maybe questionable practices. This has caused some of us to raise the alarm, and when push comes to shove, some of us had enough. We want new sets of managers and accountants and more transparency and responsibility in how assets and resources are utilized. It's very obvious that many of the resources are totally being squandered. There are 20, 30, 40 classrooms at the McLean Tyson's Corner campus. Why on a Sunday morning are there no Sunday schools anymore being held? It used to be 2 years ago, it was bustling. There were rooms everywhere where people were gathering and fellowshipping and teaching God's word and praying together. They're empty. And then on weeknights, I was trying to get rooms for our apologetics ministry, and it didn't happen. We have impenetrable, unexplained bureaucracy that's just not letting us do that. What is wrong? There has to be some accountability. And yet we have these kind of sketchy entities that have office space. They're outside of the church. They're not part of the church, or there's some strange partnership that goes on, and I'll explain that. They have offices there behind locked doors whose finances, their involvement is opaque. This financial document, we know that there's a money flow to those entities. We're not getting a sufficient accounting. Is the number in the hundreds of thousands? God forbid it's in the millions that are going unaccounted for. So that's one of the things that is at stake. There are about 6 items at stake, and I can't, there's so many things I can't cover it. We're covering it this week because a lot of people from McLean Bible Church are visiting these discussions here. I got 1,300 views on one of my videos about a pastor at McLean. He's my pastor. I disagree with him. I'll show you what he said. And you've seen this video before, but I'm sorry I have to show it again because it's just painful to hear intemperate words. It's not just that. As I thought about it more, hang on. I made a mistake here. Please excuse me. I'm having a little technical difficulty. Give me a moment here, guys. God willing, I'll get this uncorked. I'll get my switchology correct. So let me try this again. Okay. Hang on. I'm going to cue this up. I would say if I had to summarize, one of the main problems is the mixing of the gospel with social justice philosophy. We call it social justice, Marxist, whatever. But the leadership has accused the group that I'm a part of, what I would, the resistance, so to speak, of spreading disinformation. Let me just let the leadership speak in their own words here. So let me get this squared away. Hopefully you'll hear the audio. Let me know if you don't hear the audio.
Totally honest, like, so being angry about the situation, but it's difficult for me sometimes not to just torch like all white people, because in particularly white evangelicals and Christians. Totally honest, like, so being angry about the situation, but it's difficult for me sometimes not to just torch like all white people, because in particularly white evangelicals and Christians.
As I thought about this more, I've been getting grief. They're saying I'm quote mining or whatever. The problem is when a pastor is looking at someone's skin color and he's getting upset when he sees them and he's thinking about torching them or whatever, screaming just because of their skin color, and he's the lead pastor of culture and preaching. This originates from like this whole social justice thing. There's separation then between the expectations of what someone with not so much melanin versus someone that has a lot, as to how their Christian walk should be. Because this lead pastor, Mike Kelsey, is clearly upset with white Christians. That was extremely offensive. And I'll point out, and granted that there has been issues with the coronavirus, but in April of 2020, we had a peak attendance of 18,974. It is now 7,509, but it feels like it's even less than that. A lot of people left. That is known. Now, kind of the sketchy part in the finances is how are we able to sustain revenues at about the same level when our congregation got cut in half. I'd like to think it's God's grace. I am, however, concerned that there is some accounting problems here, to say the least. And so we're just kind of sniffing. We're asking, we're trying to inquire where, give an accounting for where all the money is going. That's one of the problems. So we have this So I'm going back to the accounting, but the first thing is we've got woke social justice invading the church. Half the church left. It clearly affected the numbers. It should have also affected the revenues. And in the financial report, it's indicating steady amounts of revenues. This is just I'm just like, goodness, can we, technically any member of the church can inspect the books of the church. I've had fellow congregants, at least one, try to do that. And she said, well, she's treated politely, but she wasn't getting the numbers she was looking for. Why can't we know where some of this money is going and how much? Because the way it was broken down in this annual report here, it just, it wasn't clear where it's going. There's been a feeling that sacred trusts have been violated. Now, I know this show's a little clunky. It's not quite as polished as something where I have a video that I'm just going to focus on and try to do it within 15 minutes and have all the items. This is happening so fast that I can't, I really don't have, it takes actually more time to make a short video than it does to make a 3-hour video. Because to try to pack all that information in a short amount of time, you try many things. You try maybe 100 different things. And so 99% of the drafts are just discarded. You only keep 1%. So that's a lot of retakes. And it takes a lot of video editing effort. Now, let me see if I can show you something else that's disconcerting. And it deals with what I'm hearing from the pulpit. So you'll hear multiple replays of this because I want it to sink in what's being said. This was on July 4th. The senior pastor, David Platt. Now you saw Mike Kelsey. He's just earlier. He's kind of like he's kind of second in line. So the first person in line is David Platt. He's also my pastor.
We have explained and have in writing from the SBC, we're not a member of the Southern Baptist Convention. We have explained and have in writing from the SBC, we're not a member of the Southern Baptist Convention. We have explained and have in writing from the SBC, we're not a member of the Southern Baptist Convention. We have explained and have in writing from the SBC, we're not a member of the Southern Baptist Convention.
Was the audio good, guys? And Doki, the first audio was good. Is the second audio good? So now let me show you something. So you heard David Platt. This is July 4th. He said, we are not a member of the Southern Baptist Convention. Now, membership entails, yes. Thank you again, Doki. Membership entails paying membership fees. How much membership fees have we paid? I've heard figures of like $100,000 a year. And so over 4 years, that'd be what? 400,000? Not quite $500,000. It's not a small chunk of change. There are, what does membership entail in terms of our obligations, not just financially, but anything else? Because when you become member of the Southern Baptist Convention, there are other certain expectations, contractual. As I said, just like a last will and testament, in an analogous manner, the church constitution of McLean is demanding independence from affiliation. The reasons for that. The Southern Baptist Convention see if I have my, is becoming increasingly,
We have
for starters, see if I have, it's becoming increasingly corrupt with president leaders like Ed Litton involved in a plagiarism scandal. And I've just heard some really scary things. I was on a show with Emery Moyna, and he was detailing all of the very sad things that are going on in Christendom. But this was all prophesied. This was all prophesied, and it's nothing new. But going back to when David Platt said we're not affiliated with the Southern Baptist Convention. Okay, so you heard it from his own mouth. But let's try to look at this more carefully with just public domain documents, publicly available websites. So I'm going to go to the Southern Baptist Convention website. So this is the SBC for short, the Southern Baptist Convention website. I'm going to search for churches that are Southern Baptist Convention churches. And I'm going to type in McLean. And lo and behold, look at the first line. Do you see it? It says McLean Bible Church. Now, how can we be hearing from the pulpit on July 4th that we're not affiliated with the Southern Baptist Convention? You can go right there to their website. And there's some funny dealings here that it doesn't look good. As soon as, not quite as soon, but in the process of certain astute members of the congregation trying to defend the sacred will and trust, which we call the church constitution, they began poking around and they saw what you just saw. It says, we're a church of the Southern Baptist Convention. We have some, like, say, servitude because of that. We don't want, this church was organized so that we could resist being overtaken by maybe an outside entity that's may have been wholesome at one time and then decays. So for a lot of the people, myself included, the fact that McLean Bible is being affiliated with the Southern Baptist Convention, if this happened 20, 30 years ago, it would be great. It's like, oh, well, we're joining a collection of other godly churches, but that's no longer the case. That's no longer the case. That's why there is foresight in the constitution of the church to prevent this situation where you start off with a good denomination and then it goes sour. Then what do you do? In addition to that, there are strange money flows that are really too complex to get into in this show that are disconcerting. At the last congregational meeting, these concerns could not be raised. When people were raising them in other congregational meetings, they got shut down. And some people either left the church or said, no, we need to fight this. This is not right. This is not right. So David Platt, from his platform, the pulpit, was saying that our group of the resistance was using disinformation. What disinformation have I just used? That we've been using disinformation to sow division. How more divisive can we be than you have a lead pastor of culture and preaching getting particularly upset just because someone who's an evangelical or Christian has less melanin in his skin. This is McLean Bible Church, not a church that seems to separate the congregation based on their melanin levels. That is not right. That is not right. And you know, there were sermons on racial justice. Since I've covered that, I won't go into it too much again. But I've given you evidence that David Platt said, we're not affiliated with the Southern Baptist Convention. That's evidence we're called a Southern Baptist Convention church. The issue is not, it's not just the fact that it's a violation of our Constitution. It's that there is ambiguity. Who can we trust when your pastor on Sunday morning says we're not affiliated, perhaps trying to placate some of the members in the church that are wanting independence, and then they can look on this Southern Baptist website and see a different story? This does not instill trust. And then when this was brought to as this was going on, the leadership started to back down and said, well, it's just a partnership. And it's like, okay, give us, produce copies of the documents of whatever contracts we signed, because we're paying membership dues. How can we not be a member and pay dues? There's something wrong there if we're paying dues and we're paying membership dues and we're not a member. So however this can be spun, it's not good. When words their meaning can be kind of reconstituted just for the moment's sake to be able to placate whoever is objecting, that's very disconcerting. On the McLean Bible Church website, so I'm going to show you. So I just showed you that McLean Bible is a Southern Baptist church. And so when I click more info, it has the McLeanBible.org website. And let's see what they had to say, what McLean Bible has to say. I'm going to do the elder nominees because I just know up front. It's not giving it to me. There it is, the special congregational meeting. That's D-Day. And they have here, is McLean Bible Church secretly a Southern Baptist church? And they say no. I mean, it's almost humorous because it's like, no, it's not secret, apparently, because it's right there on their website. But okay. NBC's partnership with the Southern Baptist Convention began in 2016 with a specific motion by Lon Solomon, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just going to skip down. In spite of this clear origin for the relationship, however, we have become increasingly aware that communication about McLean Bible Church and ministries of the SBC has often been unclear and confusing. This confusion has led to various church members, including our elders, to legitimately wonder about MBC's relationship to the Southern Baptist Convention. For this reason, we have immediately suspended contributions to all SBC ministries until we can fully evaluate the current state of the partnership decision made in 2016. In the meantime, we have requested all SBC entities immediately remove any listing for McLean Bible on any SBC-related website that indicates in any way that McLean Bible is anything other than an independent, non-denominational Bible church. That's not exactly true. I've heard. I don't believe that's true, because in 2017, that's not 2016 when they were trying to build a partnership. 2017, formal contracts were signed that actually did require a congregational vote that never happened to submit membership applications. You can't, this smells of we got caught, we're going to cover this up. because we messed up. It's clear when they're saying they're confused. It's like, okay, so is that your elder board? They don't even know what the state of our relationships, but we're just going to keep sending money. It could be already about $500,000. Is that good stewardship? Does that instill trust? It's like, is it because now the leadership is getting so much pressure to be more transparent, and it's so blatantly evident that we are a Southern Baptist Convention church, that they now have to backtrack and say, oh, we just don't really understand what we're doing. So at the very least, this is incompetence, but the suspicion is that there's some deal here going on. When there's smoke, there's fire. That is a big concern. We are concerned that there is some sort of hostile takeover. And there's a documentary called Enemies Within, First Baptist Church of Fort Lauderdale. The congregation is the dissenters, the resistance, of which I'm a part of, is concerned there's a woke takeover attempt at McLean Bible. A woke takeover attempt. How is it we have a woke pastor in Mike Kelsey who encourages little kids to hold up Black Lives Matter for God? I mean, what's that about? That movement is associated with burning, looting, and murdering. They've destroyed communities and livelihoods of Black people. And they're claiming to be saying Black Lives Matter. This does not look good. This looks like a liberal, woke Southern Baptist takeover of an attempt of a conservative church. Now it looks like they're trying to cover up this relationship that has been quietly contracts signed and not properly disclosed to the congregation, not properly voted on. This is very disconcerting. Now, with a lot of legal contracts, there's just a lot of things where people will just, even corporate officers could sign something and it's like, oh my goodness. All the more indication that the leadership in charge is having some issues of not knowing what they're signing up for and where the money's going. And that's, yes, that's the problem when there's a lot of money and the church is really big. You get a lot of problems you won't have in a much smaller church. But there is a very disturbing amount of corruption in the Southern Baptist Convention and corruption in the North American Missions Board, which is somehow related. Emery Moyna can tell you about all that. There's a recent Supreme Court case that involved a mission organization, a Supreme Court case with the North American Mission Board, and it destroyed a very good man's life and reputation. That North American Mission Board is now partnered with McLean, and that's another contract that we're demanding transparency of, and we're not quite getting it in the annual report. Where's the money flowing? Who's it going to? It's just kind of going out in nebulous space, and it's going into the care and trust of a corrupt entity. And so that's another thing, another reason for what this fight is about. Finances, accountability, this woke invasion of a conservative church. And you heard it from the recording right there from one of the pastors. And you know what? After he started doing all this woke stuff, he actually, you would think he would get benched or somehow kind of taken aside and said, you need to simmer down. He got promoted. Mike Kelsey got promoted for doing all this social justice activism in God's church. Now I want to point out a picture that a very wise woman, a wise and godly woman, something to think about. She emailed me this today. A wise, godly, elderly woman. I'm not going to say her name because she may be in the voting block. I'm very concerned that my name will be removed from the rolls and I won't be able to vote like I did on June 30th. And I'm trying to protect as many identities as I can. But she sent this. This is by Charles Spurgeon, and I'm just going to add one word to kind of clarify. He says, discernment is not knowing merely the difference between right and wrong. So I'm adding the word merely just to clarify. Discernment is not merely knowing the difference between right and wrong. It's knowing the difference between right and almost right. Discernment is knowing the difference between right and almost right. Just think about that. There are rhetorical tactics such as what they call straw man, where you state, to do a straw man really well, you state something that's kind of like half true or even 80% true, and then you insert in there 20% of falsehood. The aim is to get that 20% through. It's like when you want to make rat poison, it's about it could be like 95% nourishing and 5% poison. It's to encourage the rat to devour it. So let me cover this again because there's some subtleties here. Discernment is not merely knowing the difference between right and wrong. It's knowing the difference between right and almost right. Charles Spurgeon, the great preacher Charles Spurgeon. And so this thing with the SBC affiliation, there can be so much obfuscation, it's hard to tell what's right. And what's happening, it's almost right. You can be easily misled for some of the most important points. I'm just trying to, point that out there. So there's an issue of truthfulness here. It's hard to determine, this should not be a difficult question. And, are we affiliated or not? What are the contractual obligations? We're not getting a straight answer. And there's money involved. And how much, one gets the feeling if one starts to explore the accounting trails, it's getting worse and worse. And that's exactly what's happening. It just looked like a small accounting or contractual anomaly. And as we started to sniff more, it smelled worse and worse. And it's getting worse the deeper we dig in. So there's the racial justice, social justice issue. I have my list on the docket here. We have maybe millions in our church finances that has not adequate accounting. We don't know how much could even be squandered. And we're dealing with entities that are now known to be corrupt. It wasn't quite as evident maybe 5 years ago, but it's coming out. We're affiliated with an increasingly corrupt Southern Baptist Convention. It isn't the Baptist Convention your mother and father may have known, God-honoring and conservative. It's been flipped. There's been decimation of the ministries. We've had so many ministries that just gone, canceled. The management decided, no, we're not going to do that. What authority were they On what authority? On what grounds? This was never properly done. So we, for example, we had a single mother's ministry. You would think that'd be a good thing to maintain. They canceled it. And you could, I showed some pictures earlier of the McLean campus. They have plenty of empty classrooms where these people can gather. Thank God for Zoom, so people can continue to fellowship and minister. We actually had we had stuff like skateboard ministry and paintball ministries. If there was no money involved, why not let the ministry continue? This is a great way for Christians to enjoy leisure time together, and fellowship. There's, this sent a very negative message. I mean, it might seem strange. I don't know what goes on in some of these ministries, but I can imagine if there were some of these ministries, there'd be associated Bible studies with it. So a lot of people left the church because of that. There has been abuse of power from the pulpit. It's inappropriate for a pastor to be making accusations about long-standing members, one member that's been a part of the church for 50 years, from the pulpit, associating her with a group that is supposedly using deception, disinformation, and divisiveness. How right is that? How right is that? She has no opportunity to defend herself. So I'll give you an example of one thing David Platt said. He said, well, they're deceiving people by saying that if the June 30th vote went his way, they're accusing us of suggesting that McLean Bible Church's property is going to be sold to the Muslims to build a mosque. That if the congregation voted on June 30th, that's what they'd be voting for. That's a half-truth. That's exactly the thing about discerning what's right and almost right. This was an almost right description. If the church finances go south because of membership leaving and mismanagement, the church could become insolvent. It will have to be liquidated. The Saudi royal family has the money to buy it. Dr. Sandy Pigeon, who appeared here, will testify that he saw Muslims come into the church, lay out their carpet and pray and say, this is going to be ours one day. There is a threat. That is a declaration that there are Islamic parties that have the money, probably associated, lots of money from the Saudi royal family or any other Islamic entity that has lots of money. They are very interested buyers if McLean is ever up for sale. So no, we didn't say absolutely that this is going to happen, but there is a serious risk this could happen. And I shared an article recently where David Platt, while he was on a Christian international missions board, somehow got involved in helping build a mosque in New Jersey. He could have said that, yeah, he helped build a mosque in New Jersey when he was in the pulpit, but that wouldn't fit the narrative. So there is risk there. We didn't say it's going to happen. It's just pointing out the obvious that if you have to dissolve a church, you need to find a buyer who has enough money and determination and desire. That's all that was. But you see, it can be twisted to sound like we're making up some crazy conspiracy theory. If your organization starts to be insolvent, it has to be sold. It's just as simple as that. but it can be twisted to say to mean something that wasn't the original intent. But there's no opportunity for us to clarify. You see, that's how misrepresentations go. And that's why, it sounds credible at first, but it's not. It's close enough to the correct story. It's almost right, but it's not right. That's what's going on when I hear stuff coming from the pulpit. Just little statements. Oh, no, we're not affiliated with the Southern Baptist Convention. And then I show you the document. I show you the website that we are. And then it's like, oh, well, we have different meanings of what that means. See, this is not healthy. And then it's characterized like we can, my resistance group came up with some crazy conspiracy theory. It's just simple financials. We have some idea of who the buyers could be. We didn't say that they would be. We were just throwing out a hypothetical scenario. But the bottom line is, if the church goes insolvent because of the members leaving and decrease in revenue, there's going to be a buyer. So, yeah, I think I've covered most of what I wanted to talk about. Now I remember what I want to do. I'm going to read the scriptures. So I want, look at this picture here while I get my Bible verse, the Bible passage shown. So you see this wolf in sheep's clothing. And I think that also, that idea is echoed in the book of Acts. Let me shut this one down. Yes. Let me read it. This is Acts chapter 20, and I'll start at verse 28. Pay careful attention to yourselves and to all the flock, in which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers, to care for the church of God, which he obtained with his own blood. I know that after my departure, fierce wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock. And from among your own selves will arise men speaking twisted things to draw away disciples after them. This is what this feels like. On many levels, that we're being overtaken by ideas and theology that was not the intent of the church, is not in line with the Bible, which is the more important thing. And that's why I got involved in this fight. So I meant to say, for those of you who are members of McLean Bible, I'm planning to attend the prayer meeting this coming Friday at the Tyson's Corner campus of McLean Bible Church. I'm planning to, so that's going to be about 7 p.m. I look forward to meeting some of you there in person, and that may sound surprising, but I am actually, this prayer meeting is to pray for unity in the direction of the church. I'm actually praying for 100% unity in the no vote. If we end up being in the overwhelming majority, that's the irony. We've actually may end up unifying the congregation as they know more. I don't know. I know that sounds terribly optimistic, given we've been deplatformed, and as I mentioned before, the congregational meetings are a sham. They're not conducted according to biblical principles where members can come forth and raise their concerns. Instead, we are shut down. We're deplatformed. In a wedding, even traditional wedding, it used to be there'd be a moment where the minister says, "Speak now or forever hold your peace." In a sacred event, someone is given the opportunity before a major contract is signed. It echoes what happens in the congregational meeting regarding big decisions. And there's not been due process. And I talked about in another show allegations that are very concerning about one particular elder, and we're not going through due process, and we can't establish that he's above reproach because there's questions about his personal life. And as I said, normally we welcome repentant sinners to be part of the congregation. We always do, not just normally. We always welcome repentant sinners to be part of the congregation. But if one applies to be an elder and a leader in the church, he's held to much higher standards. His personal life becomes church business. I've raised my concerns that have been prevented from being aired at a congregational meeting. And so some of us are also upset at the lack of due process. There's been violations of what I believe and what several others believe is what our Lord and Savior taught us. That is really the bottom line of all this. What's this fight about? It's our interpretation of what is right and wrong. And, I tried to show you Mike Kelsey in his own words saying what I think most conservative Christians would view as just appallingly wrong. And that's what this fight is about in our church. We do not want leaders shepherding the flock in this way. Most of the teaching is right. Actually, most of the teaching is right. But as I said, this is where the problem lies. Discernment is not merely knowing the difference between right and wrong. It is knowing the difference between right and almost right. The current leadership gets a lot right, but where they get it wrong is significant enough that we would want them, the resistance group would want them removed. And so that's it for today. I don't know if I'm going to have a show on Thursday or Friday because it's going to be busy, and I may be seeing hopefully some of you on the McLean campus. We will be praying for unity. We will be praying for unity in the vote. I'm praying for unity in the vote, that he will inspire God's people. Right now, the resistance is in a desperate minority. We were just barely big enough to move the series of votes forward where we could unseat the current leadership. I mean, we're hanging in there. If we're able to prevail in this upcoming vote, we'll be just one step away from removing the current leadership. And that would include Mike Kelsey and his woke agenda for the church. So it's been a long night. I thank you all for joining us. I know it's been kind of a clunky presentation. A lot of us are working very hard on numerous things, not just church things. So let me greet everyone. Joe Wilson. Yes, our sister from across the pond. Let him who is least esteemed in church judge among you. Someone says, "You know too much, Sal." I'll be praying for you. How good is it when brothers dwell together in unity? So I will be praying for unity this coming Friday. I'll be praying for unity this coming Friday at McLean Bible Church. I hope to meet some of you there. Yes, the church sounds like his church is in financially perilous conditions. Yes, the important church. The D-Day is July 18th, and it's almost an apt analogy because whatever the outcome, there's going to be a lot of casualties on both sides, I'm afraid. I'm praying for unity and that it won't be that way, but it could be. Whatever happens, there could be large departures in the congregation one way or the other. And, I read a letter from Mark Gottlieb. It's on the Capstone Report. Also, he's the former elder, and he was objecting, and he resigned from the elder board. And he's very concerned about the solvency of the church, despite glowing financial reports that just don't seem to align with reality. And that's really disconcerting. We can, we smell something that is not good. The more that we investigate this, the worse it smells. And, well, that's all I have for tonight. And take care, and the Lord bless you. Have a good evening.